Hello and welcome listeners to the Where Are They Now video series. In celebration of our 20th anniversary, NCID is sitting down with past seed grantee founders to catch up on their accomplishments and activities since receiving the grant. And today I am joined by not one, but two co-founders. Very stoked to have this conversation today with Ricci Wolman and Ferol Vernon, co-founders of Written Word Media, which I believe was a 2014 seed grantee, which is kind of around the time you guys started. I believe you guys got a grant pretty soon after you started. Real quickly, I'll give my butchered background on what Written Word Media does, and then I'll throw the mic over to you all to say it better. But Written Word Media empowers authors and publishers to grow their audience through specialized marketing services and software tools designed for book promotion. Did I copy and paste that correctly from your website?
Yeah, you did a great job there.
Did you good?
Yeah, good. I'm glad to hear that. All kidding aside, why don't I give the microphone? You are a married couple, so I'm not going to try to mediate who I'm going to direct questions to. I do have some specific questions for each of you, but for the general ones, it's just going to be a jump ball. You all can decide between the two of you, and maybe the person that doesn't win the jump ball has to do dishes tonight. But who wants to give the official commercial for Written Word Media?
I can take it, Tom. So, Written Word Media is a media company. We've got 1.5 million readers registered for the platform. So that's people that read books. We send out daily emails to those readers. So the primary way readers interact with the platform is through email, and they get targeted recommendations. So if you like to read science fiction or you like to read mystery, you only get science fiction or you only get mystery books in your email. And then our customer is the author, the independent creative who's writing the books. And to them, we sell advertising in those newsletters to readers. And we do that, thousands of times a month. So it's a very high volume operation. We send 230, 240 million emails a year. So everything we do is at scale and is designed to help authors reach the right readers in the genre that they're writing in.
I saw that, and thank you for that. That is better and more articulate than I was saying, but it's also impressive from a volume standpoint. And I hope we will get some time today to really dig down. And let me come at it from a different angle. As I was preparing for today's conversation, I was fascinated by, we see so many businesses being impacted by AI. And I gotta believe, writing books and promoting books is gotta be maybe not at the top of like the most impacted, but it's gotta be damn close. And so I was very anxious to talk to a couple experts on like, what is AI doing to the industry? Because I love your passion for, if anybody hasn't been on their website, please check it out because they make a very clever plea for the value to humanity for people reading books. And I couldn't agree more. I am very passionately aligned with that value. It's something that we instilled in our children, and I'm happy to say with all of them in their 30s now, they're very avid readers, and it really it's in their DNA, and I couldn't agree more with that ethos that you guys project on your website. And it seems like AI is kind of like a double-edged sword, right? Because it's producing a lot of garbage and a lot of like overnight books, written in 24 hours or less, and it shows. I find a lot of AI, people are very concerned that it's going to be a threat. I don't think of it as much of a threat because so far, the AI content I see seems so painfully obvious to me because it's soulless. I just don't see a soul, but I realize I'm already talking too much, and I really want to hear from the experts. So why don't we jump in right there and just say, you've all been at this for well over a decade. What is the impact of AI to your business and more broadly, the community?
Yeah, so AI is a very controversial topic among authors. And authors are pretty much bifurcated. There's the camp of AI is a boon. It's going to help us do our job better. It's going to help to make marketing easier. It's just another tool that we have in our toolkit, similar to when Grammarly rolled out, or Microsoft Word for word processing and spell check. And then there's a camp of authors who are, virulently anti-AI and are very concerned that it is going to be the death of creativity and is going to steal all the author jobs. And, each camp, I think, has its points. We are probably more AI optimistic. We think that AI is going to be extremely helpful for authors, is going to enable them to be more efficient. And I think we see a world in which, and we're seeing this across every industry, what's really going to matter is the brand. And so behind the story and behind what authors are writing, what people care about are not just the stories themselves, but the authors too. And we've already seen this after doing this for a decade. The authors that are most successful are the authors that have created a connection with their readers. So whether it's on social media or whether they email their readers or whether they do in-person events, people love the author and they love the author's work. Or maybe you read a book and then you discover the author and you love the author too. And so we think that that personal connection, being a human author and being able to connect with readers, is going to become more important in the age of AI. But the authors that can master that and are willing to do it will be able to continue building really great businesses.
So, Ricci, I take your point about brand, and I wholeheartedly agree. But so, what does that mean to like the first-time author or an aspiring author? Does AI make it that much harder to break in? Is it neutral, or can they leverage it too by, oh boy, this sounds like a shameless plug I just set up. I promised the listener I didn't. It just kind of got ambled my way there. Or as long as they hook into a service like written word media, new authors can be discovered and do just fine.
Yeah, I think discovery has always been the challenge. So discovery was the reason that we started written word media 11 years ago, because back then there were 2 million books on Amazon and everyone was like, oh my gosh, how do I get my book to stand out? In the world of AI, maybe there are going to be 200 million books on Amazon, but the question is the same. How do I get my books to stand out? How do I get people to actually come to my book page or to come to my product page? And this isn't only a problem for books. This is the challenge of any product, whether you're doing a food brand or a beauty product, or you're setting up a new sneaker brand that you're interested in doing. People have great products and great ideas and maybe great execution, but if no one knows about it, you can't really build a business. So you really discovery is at the heart of what we do, but as we move more and more into a world of AI, it's going to become exponentially more important, I think, across all industries.
Yeah, I'm glad you used that phrase discovery. It's going to be important. As I was preparing for today's call, I noticed Ferol in particular, prior to written word media, you were at Reverb Nation, which if I understood the mission there was kind of very similar. You're just helping musicians, right? I mean,
Yeah.
is that kind of what helped create the genesis for written word media? Because
Yeah, I would say what didn't really help the genesis. It was very helpful to have that perspective that like understand what the independent creative was going through, right? Like I talked to bands and there's some really, differences between authors and musicians in terms of their motivations and how they are as customers, but they're both sort of like awesome people, right? They're like creative people adding sort of interesting things to the world. And so like serving them is fun, right? Like it's a blast, right? And so that didn't really, I'll let Ricci kind of tell the genesis story because it's really around a book that her mom wrote. It wasn't so much the sort of experience that I brought from music, but I do think that, coming from the independent creative, we had a really good sense of like what kind of things needed to happen, even though the market for, musicians and authors is quite different. A lot of the things for the independent creative are the same.
Yep, I can relate to that. It's, I think, why we're somewhat kindred spirits. One of my past entrepreneurial endeavors was owning creative agency, and
Yeah, there you go.
I love the creative output of that. But Ricci, why don't you tell me about how did you make your mother into a New York Times bestseller?
I didn't. There was not an aspiration.
That's the story. Yeah.
But her book did launch this wonderful company called Written Word Media, so it was a grand success. My mom had written a book, and she is not tech savvy. She'd be the first to say. And so, and my background at that time was that I had been working in digital marketing. I actually was working in the Body Shop, which was based out in Wake Forest. L'Oreal had bought it, so at that point it was owned by L'Oreal. And when we moved down to the area, I took a job there actually in a finance position, but it was basically a finance analyst for their e-commerce division. And after a year, I moved over into e-commerce. And this is when everything was brand new. Like, we only had Google Ads, and like SEO was in its absolute infancy. Facebook didn't even exist. It was kind of a crazy time.
Yep.
And over the next, 10 years, I got to see this entire digital marketing world and machine come to life. And my mom, published a book. So she called me up. She's like, how do I get this book onto Amazon? Because Amazon was like the biggest retailer, probably the biggest website after Google at the time. And I basically helped her get the book on. Back then, Amazon was the only place where you could actually go direct with your ebooks without having a gatekeeper. So Amazon was very popular with authors because it opened the doors to say, hey, you have a book and you wrote it. We're just going to let you put it up on our site and access all of these consumers and all of these readers. And that was revolutionary at the time. Before, you had to go through a publisher, everyone was vetting your book. Most people were getting rejected. And so it was the beginning of the creator economy, where you could actually create something and put it out there and let the people judge the quality of the work, instead of somebody being a middle person and saying, yes, you can, or no, you can't. And so through the process of getting her book up on Amazon and realizing that it was just one of millions of books, and that she really needed marketing help and help to be discovered, is how Free Booksy, which is our very first brand, our very first media brand, was born, because that was the tool that I used to be able to get visibility for her. And in the very beginning, it was just a Facebook page. It was literally a Facebook page. It was called Free Booksy. And back then, when you posted on Facebook, everybody saw your post.
Right.
And because I knew how to market, I was able to rack up thousands of fans that literally would cost a penny a piece. So I could spend, $10 a day, and the numbers just went up, up, up. And then
amazing.
I would post. It was crazy. I look back and I'm like, we should have spent more.
Yeah, we should have spent more money.
I mean, hindsight's always 20/20, right?
Always
Like
20/20. You don't know how good you have it until, everything moves
Right.
on. And so I had this, audience, and I would just pick a free book every day. And then once a month, that free book would be my mom's. And what landed up happening is Free Booksy started moving the Amazon charts. So the books that were picked would now show up in the top 10, top 100 free books of the day. And authors started figuring it out, and they would DM us on Free Booksy and say, hey, can I pay you to put my book on your Facebook page? And that's literally how the business was born.
which is, I mean, it's a great story, right? And it sounds like kind of by chance, but it's so common. There are so many great companies that start that way, right? Just good fortune. You were out there. You were kind of imbuing the entrepreneurial mindset, trying, tinkering, figuring things out, and then, whammo, the opportunity presented itself. But it is funny for us that are a little gray in the beard to think about those days, because I remember back in my agency, Facebook was still largely just college campus thing, right?
Yeah.
And we were having this debate about one of our clients and where we did client acquisition, and we were debating that. And it was like, yeah, but their brand isn't like sneakers or fleece sweatshirt. Like, the audience of college kids, like, I mean, maybe someday this Facebook thing will become mainstream, but for now, we don't really see it. The company we were doing that for was like in yard equipment and things like that. And they're like, you're not going to see it, but oh, the good old days. Now, so we know, Ferol, you had that Reverb Nation thing, previous experience. I have to ask, Ricci, it seems like your career started in finance, like in investment banking at Bear Stearns, and from there you went to Acxion?
Yeah, I've had a very interesting path, Tom. When you look at my resume, you're like, what was this woman thinking?
I'm just thinking culturally to go from Bear Stearns, because I know Acxion. I learned about Acxion. I don't know if they were called the Opportunity Fund back then, but when I was at the Kauffman Foundation.
Yep.
And the micro lending, everything that Acxion was doing, and it just was kind of aligning with a portfolio that I was working on at the time. So I was so elated to see that on your CV. But then I thought, this is a weird juxtaposition. Bear Stearns, and I'm not casting aspersions on Bear, but, investment banking at Bears to doing good, like that had to be a cultural dynamic shift.
Yes, it was a cleansing of the soul move. I
Yeah,
actually
okay.
the first year I worked there, I didn't get paid. I went in as an AmeriCorps volunteer. So I worked on Wall Street for just under 2 years. And I actually loved finance, but the culture of Wall Street, especially back then, was not for me. And I knew I wanted to do something that had a broader mission. And finance, 𝘞𝘈𝘛𝘕 does microfinance, so I could take
Right.
those finance skills and bring them into a nonprofit organization. But when I went and chatted to them, they were like, "We don't have money, but you can be an AmeriCorps volunteer." And I got a stipend of like $1,000 a month, and I lived off my Wall Street bonus for a year. And then they hired me full time before I went to business school. But yes, it was definitely a real U-turn 180. But I think the theme throughout has been I've been drawn to organizations that have mission. Um, and then going back to your previous point about, Ferol and I and how the business kind of started by accident, this opportunity came to us, and these opportunities tend to be a confluence of luck and timing and skills. But we always knew we wanted to work together. And so we had a failed
Yeah.
spice rub business that we had tried together. And I actually had a fair trade business that I was running when I was at 𝘞𝘈𝘛𝘕, trying to do it on a Yahoo store. And neither of those really went. And then kind of, third time was a charm. But a North Star of like actually being an entrepreneur and starting my own business. And then after I met Ferol, running a business together, that was the intention. It took us a while to get there.
Yeah, I can just say Ricci and I modeled kind of what we wanted to do after my cousins, who were actually entrepreneurs. So Vinu, Malik, and Ann Vernon, they ran this company, Fuel Belt. It was like hydration belts for ultra athletes.
It was actually purchased by a company down here in North
Oh,
Carolina.
that's right. Yeah.
I don't remember the name.
The name's escaping me.
Yeah.
Yeah. But we went to visit them, and they had this amazing office on the water, and they were doing things that they loved, and they were working together as a married couple. And we weren't actually married at the time. We just went to visit them. They lived in Rhode Island. And then on the drive back to Boston, where we were living at the time, it was about an hour drive. We were like quiet for that first 20 minutes. And they were kind of like, they really have it figured out.
Yeah.
And we kind of modeled our life after theirs. And it took us, I don't know, maybe another 10 years before we actually started 𝑘𝑚𝑜𝑟𝑒 Media and kind of had it. But that, like Ricci said, was always our North Star. It was always what we wanted to do. And so, it's been a wild ride, but it was very intentional, even though the actual business that we end up started by accident.
Well, kudos to you living your values. It's always sad for me to see so many people living lives of quiet desperation. They're working at a job that they hate, or I call that the TGIF crowd, right?
Yep.
I'm a TGIM kind of guy. Like I mean, I like my weekends, decompress, do crazy, stupid stuff. But I love the team. I love what we're doing. We get to help people like you all realize your entrepreneurial ambition, and we get paid to do that. Like, how cool is that, right? And so living with purpose and being intentionally happy, I think it's actually a common element for successful entrepreneurs. I think you'll find many, because the work, at the risk of stating what you already know better than most, the work is not easy, and you make sacrifices for it. And so there's got to be like a higher purpose, right? Or a higher fulfillment that comes from it if you're going to sustain it. And, I think that's just a wonderful thing. And I think as we've been chatting, we were chatting a little bit earlier before we were rolling, I think, and I believe this when I said it then, and I believe it now, is that y'all are a good example, right? That one of the benefit of doing these series is highlighting folks like you too, because you're aspirational to those that want to follow in your footsteps. And at the risk of stating something stupidly obvious, we're living in kind of difficult times, right? And people need things to be hopeful about. And seeing role models is very, very helpful, including role models that are spouses. On the kind of the private equity side of our world, in the capital stack, there are folks that are adamantly, opposed to funding companies
Of
that
course.
have
Yeah, we heard that a lot.
married founders. I'm sure of it. I'm sure
It's
of it.
not news, Tom.
Right. And, I would say that those people that are closed-minded that way, Exhibit A, why you should think about it, right? It's right here. And again, that's just one of many ways that you're inspiring others to do that. In addition to like sitting down for this and giving back, because I think entrepreneurs are some of the most generous people that are walking our planet. So thank you for that. Now, you'd mentioned, you were in Boston at the time, and Ricci, I could be wrong, but I don't think that's an Eastern North Carolina accent. So how is it you two find yourself in this wonderful state? Much like myself, I'm a non-native, although I have been going to the Outer Banks since 1972.
Wow.
I have a
Man.
picture with my father and I, with a fishing pole in the surf out in Cape
That's
Hatteras.
awesome.
It's dated 1972. I think that was the first year we went. But what brought you to North Carolina?
Ferol, you take this one because it was
Yeah.
really Duke.
Yeah, so I was applying to business school, and we were ready to leave Boston, and so when I got into Duke, we were also we knew a lot of people that get into business school, they go there for 2 years and then they bounce to wherever the next job takes them. We were looking for a place to call home when I got into school, and North Carolina is very familiar to me. My parents met at Duke. My grandmother, who's actually going to turn 100, was one of the first women at Duke. And my aunt actually teaches at UNC, and she lives 10 minutes from us. So,
And you haven't disowned her?
No, well, family gatherings are fun. We don't do them
Okay.
in March.
There you go.
But North Carolina was, and we've been coming to the beach as kids, Tom, a lot like you, for my whole life. And so North Carolina wasn't foreign. So when I got into Duke, I probably had to convince Ricci, hey, North Carolina is this wonderful place. But once we got here, I think we fell in love with it pretty quickly. And like Ricci said, she had this amazing job. I'll let her talk about that. But, I found a job that I loved at Reaver very quickly. And so, we really didn't look back. Once we came to North Carolina, we're this is where we want to be, and it's treated us really well.
And so, Ricci, were you at Lulu then at the time?
No, I was at the Body Shop. So Ferol and I met in Boston. I grew up in South Africa, came to the States for college. So I moved to the States when I was 17, 18, went to college, went to Wall Street, then landed up back in Boston for Axion. And that's where Ferol and I met through a mutual friend. And then, as Ferol said, he got into business school. And I love Boston. It's a beautiful city, but the weather was really tough for me coming from South Africa. And so, when we were looking at North Carolina, I was like, it's sunnier, so that sounds great. And then when I found out the Body Shop was based down here, I was thrilled because I had read Anita Roddick's book about how she founded the Body Shop. It was one of the first social enterprises. She was a British woman. I'd read the book, but I had no idea they were based down here. So then I got the job at the Body Shop. We moved down. Ferol started school. I started a job right away. So, really worked out perfectly. But what I will say is, this is back in 2005, six,
I think, yeah.
And when we decided to stay, people thought we were crazy, right? The triangle is so hot right now, and everyone wants to move here. But back then, people would look at us weird, especially at the business school crowd. And a big part about being an entrepreneur or living a life to your values is courage. And you have to have the courage to do things that is different from what everyone else is doing. And everyone else was leaving and going to New York and San Francisco. And they were like, what are you doing staying in this, town, this kind of small town? And we felt really confident in our decision. We're we know exactly what we're doing. We love the weather. We love the people. We can start a company here. We can have an affordable life. We can buy a house. And now it's the cool thing to do. But back then it really wasn't. And that theme, I think plays itself over and over again in the decisions and the life that we live. And it's one of the pieces of advice I try to give aspiring entrepreneurs or just humans in general is if you want to live your own life, you actually have to have the courage to follow through on the decisions that reflect the values that you want.
Yeah, living with agency is very, very important if you're going to live well and age successfully. Ferol, it sounded like you wanted to add to that.
Yeah, I think, one of the things that we often say is if you don't if you don't plan your day, somebody else will, right?
Oh, that's good.
And it's the same thing as like, if you don't plan your business, somebody else will. If you don't plan your life, somebody else will, right? And so you do have to plan. Like, one of the things Ricci and I have always done, always, is like sat down and like wrote down like what we kind of want our life to look like, right? And we did that before we started the company, and we hit some of our goals a little earlier than we thought, which was awesome. And we definitely had periods where we have to, restate those goals. But like, I think that's something that I tell everybody to do is like, whatever your goal is, entrepreneurial or otherwise, like write it down and then like check in on it in a year or 2 or 5 or whatever it is. But too many people, I think, just kind of like go, and like I say often, inertia is very powerful, right?
Oh, yeah.
And so whatever track you're on, you're going to stay unless you do something different. And I think one of the things that we've been very fortunate is that both Ricci and I are like-minded, and that we set down a goal, and even if it's a little off from what everybody else says, like Ricci said, we got those looks. And like when I quit my job and said, hey, I'm going to go start this company with my wife, I got a lot of those looks. But we're very intentional about doing those things, and we know what our values are, and we sort of, march towards them with vigor. And I think it's treated us really well.
And not just you, but your kids. Think about the example that sets for them. I would imagine, much like my kids were when they were, coming up, they are the aspirational one. Like, let me say this a different way. The parents of your children's friends probably adore your kids, and they see your kids as a good influence on them, because I know that was the case with mine. And, and I would bring them into the offices. They grew up with a crazy old man that would start or sell a company every 3 to 5 years. So like, I took them into events. I'd take them when I'd go do big shows, explain why we were doing this. They understood the
awesome.
years that Santa was a cheap bastard. It's because Dad was trying to finance his next startup. And they also knew when, like, there was like manna from heaven falling down, like, oh, and Dad sold the company and Santa was really generous this year. Like, they could put all that together, right? And live that way. And it's nice to see them taking that as young adults in there. But, and likewise, I'm not down here by accident, right? I had the same opportunity to see it for what it was, not just for the fact that a kid from Cleveland, Ohio ended up down here, but, I was serving on the board at the Kenan Institute of Private Enterprise for about a decade before I even took the job. That brought me down here. And every time my career took like a nice, either really cool and intentional turn or a big inflection up, it was always because I made a big life change. And like my wife and I decided, okay, yeah, we can move from Cleveland to Detroit for a while, right? And then we can go do this. And then, oh, you're going to go work for the Kauffman Foundation in Kansas City. Yeah, we can do that. I think that's, again, part of what's missing today in society. People are so learned helplessness, where they just feel they're a victim of their circumstances. They've given up all of their autonomy. But that's not what we're here to talk about. So let's just say to that goodbye. Okay, so now we've established you're not native sons and daughters of the South, guilty as charged. You came down here. So how did you plug in? I have to shamelessly ask this. So how did you plug into the ecosystem? And then ultimately, how did you get connected to NC IDEA such that, we had the good sense to write you a $50,000 check?
Yeah. So I worked at the body shop, for 4 or 5 years. Ferol was at Reverb. Then I went to Lulu for a year. And then I was pregnant with our son, and I decided I was going to go and start consulting and kind of building a small agency in customer acquisition, digital customer acquisition. And so while I was doing that, I plugged into the community in ATC. And really, it was Chris Hively at the time. He was running the Startup Factory. And I would come in and like volunteer my time to the startups there who wanted help with like, hey, what's Google? What are Facebook ads? Things
I'm going to interrupt
like
you
that.
here.
Yeah.
You've been generously a supporter of ours in your programming too, and have lent your expertise to our company. So sorry for the interruption, but I want to make sure that moment didn't pass. You continue to be generous with your time, and thank you for that.
Yeah, happy to help. But yeah, I can talk about, digital marketing all day long. So that's fun for me. But yeah, I met Chris and that was really the beginning of learning about this entire startup ecosystem. Everybody was so incredibly welcoming and generous. Bronto was one of my first paying customers. So I actually worked with Susan Wall. She hired me as a consultant to help them with, customer attribution and getting their systems pulled together. And then I think, just through being plugged in and actually physically being on the campus, and then being, I think we didn't have an office yet at American Underground, but like we'd go over there sometimes.
Yeah.
We learned about NC IDEA, and then we applied in, I think it was the summer, fall of 2014, as you said, Tom. And at that point, we had our daughter. So this is like 2011 was my son, 2014 is our daughter. And that's when Ferol quit his job at Reverb. So we had a 4-month-old and a 3-year-old, and he quit his job. And that was probably August, September of 2014.
Yeah, something like
and
that,
then
yeah.
we got the NCDI grant in November. So it meant like everything to us.
Yeah.
We were pretty scared, right? Like Ferol had been the paycheck and the health insurance and everything else. And we had 2 brands. We had Free Booksy and Bargain Booksy. And we were making money from both authors and affiliate revenue. But getting that NC IDEA grant was a game changer for us. It was a lot of money. It made us feel like we had made the right decision. We were on the right path. And then we took all that money and we created 2 more brands. So we doubled our portfolio of media companies. And through that, it also gave us some time to figure out, should we raise money? Should we not? Because at the time we were really on the fence about that. And so getting those funds enabled us to build something, enabled us to actually increase our, revenue and cash flow to the point that it enabled us to maintain a bootstrap company, and really added a lot of fuel to the fire of where we were going. It was amazing.
I appreciate that, and I think I can't say this because I wasn't making the decisions, and I've been only here 10 years in March, which I cannot believe.
Wow.
It's been that long. But your kind of give back to the ecosystem ethos, I think you can't possibly fathom how important that was probably to the funding decision, right? This is what we advise people, like showing up is half of the fight.
Sure.
Right. Being seen, being in the ecosystem, willing to give first before asking. These are these are kind of life advice skills that we give to people. But I mean, it's great business skill, especially in an ecosystem like we have here in the Triangle, but more broadly in the state of North Carolina. Again, it's part of, Ricci, when you were talking about the intentionality of being here, when others go like, I even had that to a little small degree when I left Kaufman to come here. People are like, what, you're not going to New York or Boston or LA?
That's
or,
right.
The Bay, because I used to go to San Francisco quite a bit. Matter of fact, I still have family there. My sister lives in Menlo Park. Love there, but would never live there. Love visiting. But it's just like, no. There's something about the ethos that's here. And if you plug into it, community is a form of currency if you leverage it properly. And I mean that in the sense of financial value. It won't be somebody necessarily just writing you a check, but it's finding that co-founder. Now, in your case, you kind of cheated in the way you found your co-founder. But there are others that need help, building that extended network to fill the ranks of the important hires that they have. So now, and as I mentioned in my rude interruption, you still keep your, spoon in the pot of the ecosystem here. So I think this is a fair question to ask, like, based upon then and now, do you have any thoughts about like how the ecosystem has changed, better or worse? I'm not just fishing for compliments or platitudes. Like, do you find it easier, harder? Like, what's just your observation from somebody that's really traversed that over a decade?
I mean, I would just say like the ecosystem's awesome. I think obviously it took a hit during COVID. Like when we were first running the company and we were at AU, the vibe there was amazing, right? Like you felt part of the movement being in downtown Durham. I used to like play basketball with like the other like founders at the AU, and there was, now then we like actually invested in some of those companies and are still in touch with those people. And there was like there was a tangible energy, and I think that took a little bit of a hit during COVID because people weren't there, and that was really a bummer. I mean, that was across the country. It's not sort of unique to our area, but I'd say that the community is still pretty vibrant, and we still have a lot of that social capital that you built before. You can still leverage now, and I think it's really nice that it's starting to come back. And like we're now sort of located in Chapel Hill, but every time I'm back in downtown Durham, I'm like, oh man, I miss this. I don't miss the drive on 15501, but I do miss being there and being around other founders for sure.
Yeah, I get that. I was at Kauffman. I was on the board at the Kennedy Institute of Private Enterprise, and I came down for a visit. I was coming in for a board meeting, but Adam Klein knew we had connected in some way. And so Adam and Michael gave me a tour of AU when it was still under construction. So y'all weren't in it yet. And like we were down in the vault and it was being painted. And like within 10 minutes, we were all getting somewhat high and headaches from the fumes. And it was like, okay, we should probably get out of this building. It's not safe yet. Like there's a reason all those guys are wearing respirators. But just like for me to see that, before, it became American Underground and then see what it is today was really quite a treat. I had a similar experience in Winston-Salem with Winston Starts when I first got to visit the big building on 500 Main. It was still under construction. And now I go over there and just to see all the companies and several of our funded companies that are thriving in that environment as well. It's just, I don't know, it's a proud papa moment. And that's probably not an appropriate analogy, but it's very, very cool to see that. Let me ask you something. Sorry, Ricci, you were going to say something?
No, I was going to add that I think one of the other things that has changed is the community is larger, which I think is great. Like it's been so cool to see this, really small startup community grow, both in number, but also in geography. Like Durham really was like the center of it all. And now, Raleigh's really doing amazing. And Charlotte has like a really cool, entrepreneurial ecosystem. And
Wilmington, big.
Yeah, Wilmington and even like Greensboro, right? And Asheville. And so, but the thing that's remained the same despite the growth is the generosity of spirit.
Absolutely.
Like if you pick up the phone or you shoot a LinkedIn message or an email to somebody in the ecosystem, they will take your call. They will do a meeting. Scott Wingo is kind of a little bit of like a super connector, as is Chris Hively in this way, as is like NC Idea. But you don't see that in other places.
Nope.
In the major cities, it's very cutthroat. Everybody's competing with each other. And down here, people are rooting for each other.
Yep.
And that's a really big difference. And it was that way when we came in, and it still is that way now. And I think that's something really special.
I'm right there with you. And I tell people, I said, like, I don't know if that's a Southern thing and it's just Southern politeness, but even, cities that I love, like I think you two did with your time in Boston, like I love Boston. Give me Boston over New York any day of the week and twice on Sunday. But in all these larger markets, and I've done tons of stuff in all of them, it's very like, yeah, oh, sure, I'll help you. Just show me everything you know. Oh, thanks for that.
Exactly.
Yeah,
dummy. Right.
Yeah.
And it just doesn't have it happen down here. And I love it. It's one of the many reasons we love being here by choice. So I have to ask this in most of these, because again, there's going to be aspiring folks watching. What I know, and sorry, it's kind of a patented, boring question, but it's got nutritional value. It's good calories for the upstarts. What
it's
advice?
The vegetables of the episode.
It is.
Let's get our broccoli, Tom.
Trust me, we're going to end on dessert. I've got the perfect dessert question, but let's power through veggies and then we'll finish with dessert. What advice would you have? Like I know there's when we ask you to address our micro grantees, we're asking you in your SME capacity as digital marketers. Now I'm going to ask you more as the mentor capacity. So beyond just what your specialty area of skills are, what advice would you give founders, whether they are married couples or not? It doesn't have to be. I don't want to lead the witness in that regard, but like just generally speaking, what advice would you offer founders today?
I think we probably have very similar answers, so I'll try not to steal Ricci's. But I think one of the things I've always told everybody is like, try to build something, right? And so when they say like, when you interview anybody who's tried to make something, and it really doesn't matter whether it was a hobby or professionally, that's a good sign. right? And today, with AI and some of the tools that are out there, it's easier than ever to try to build something. And so I would say the spirit of experimentation is even more important than it used to be, because the tools for building something are better than they've ever been. You know, I think about like some of the things we built at Reverb Nation, which were amazing. We wouldn't even have to build half of the stuff now.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And so for the sort of younger entrepreneurs out there, I would say, you know, play with the modern tool set. Like if you're a developer, like go grab Cursor and play with that. If you're not, grab one of these sort of vibe coding tools and play around with it. But there's never been a more exciting time in the world to build. And that's for software and hardware. I'm really interested in robotics and stuff, but like anything that you want to build, the tools are great, and go have fun with it, and don't, there's no reason to get stuck right now in sort of the current environment.
Yeah, there's a guy I got to meet in May at the Global Entrepreneurship Congress. You may have heard of him. He's considered an entrepreneur. His name is Mark Cuban. I believe I'm pronouncing that correctly.
Yeah, I've heard of him.
Doesn't sound familiar, Tom.
And that was Ferol. I mean, he must have like looked into your psyche, because that was his closing thought. He said it's
really?
never been easier. You know, he's building a multi-billion-dollar pharmaceutical, you know, medical medicine business. And he said, we don't even have coders anymore. And he said, like, you know, I used to, like, product managers are responsible for building the whole go-to-market strategy for each individual product line, which includes building the apps, the market acquisition systems, because they don't have to be developers anymore. Ricci, come on, you can top that.
Yeah, so I think, you know, the courage one we addressed, but have the courage to actually design and live the life that you want. And then the second thing is be patient. Success doesn't happen overnight. And you can be intentional and you can put things out there into the universe and you can write down your goal, but it's not going to come true in 24 hours or maybe in a year or maybe even 2 years. But you got to keep trying. And as this pertains to, say, NC IDEA, is if you apply and you get rejected the first time, you should apply again. If you try, you know, to start a business and it doesn't go exactly the way that you wanted, or it's taking longer, be resilient and stick with it. I think the biggest challenge we have right now, almost as a society, is that people feel like this is what I want and I deserve to have it right away. And if it doesn't, it's someone else's fault that it's not happening. And you do have the power. You do have autonomy. You can make these things happen, but they take time. That is just one of the laws of life. You know, in nature, it's the same way. You plant a seed and you don't get the fruit the next day. It takes a while for that to happen. And so trying to channel, combining courage with channeling patience, I think is probably the advice that I would give to entrepreneurs out there today.
I love that. And not just because I have a lychee tree in a little pot that's this big on my windowsill in my kitchen. And I know they can't grow here, but I was like, I love lychees so much. I want to see if I could take one of these seeds and grow it. And it's taken me like 6 months to get this big, but that is just great advice. So, all right, dessert as promised. What's the flop? What the flop are you doing? What is this? Are you just bored?
Oh, that's great, Tom.
I was bored, and I was both bored and so curious and inspired by AI during, you know, really most of this year and during the summer. And, you know, I was deep in how to use AI mostly to make parenting easier, like all the administrative stuff that comes with having 2 kids in 2 schools with 2 sports and all of that good stuff. And I was playing around and doing a bunch of stuff with AI. And I kept telling my friends, and they were like, show me how to do that. Wait, what is that? What's that link? What's that tool? So I started a weekly newsletter called The Flop, where I would break down the basics of the fundamentals of like what AI is, all the jargon that's getting thrown around. And I would send that out on a daily basis. I am in hiatus right now because written word media has gotten really busy. But my goal is to take a lot of those articles and eventually turn it into a book that parents and kids can read together. Because one of my concerns with AI is that we turn into this world of have and have-nots. And I think there are a lot of people who are so intimidated by AI and they hear these terms being thrown around and they're like, I'm already behind. I can't catch up. And it's just not true. And so the idea behind The Flop was to demystify these terms, to make everyone understand that like we're right at the beginning, and it's really worth learning and playing and being curious about this stuff, because it is where the future is going, whether you like it or not. And so, yeah, that's the flop. It's a newsletter. It's also a sandbox for what we're doing for authors, because we tell authors to create brands and to email their readers, and there are a bunch of new ESPs out there. So I was testing out Substack.
Sorry, ESP?
Oh, email service providers,
Okay.
like a MailChimp. So it was also a way to test out Substack and to test out Beehive, which is the new buzzy email service provider. But I'm not alone in my experimentation, because Ferol launched a newsletter too called 𝘞𝘈𝘦 𝘈𝘕, not to be outdone.
Yeah.
And he can tell you about that one.
Yeah, well, I'll try to make the story quick. So Ricci and I are both doing the same thing. We wanted to experiment with like brand building and the modern sort of newsletter stack. We've been in email marketing basically our whole careers, and so I love it. But I've just been really interested in robotics, and AI has made robots go crazy. You see all these cool videos online, and so I started writing about this because I wanted to get one to do chores for me. I was like, I don't really feel like I should have to do laundry anymore, and so can I buy a robot to do that? And the short answer is no. But if you go to 𝘞𝘈𝘕𝘈𝘦, you can follow along with my journey. But the funnest part about it, and the reason I'm going to relate this story, Tom, is what you said earlier about how you brought your kids to shows. So we decided to do these newsletters. I'd been doing it for maybe 2 or 3 weeks. And there was this conference in Boston about robotics. And at the same time, we'd been somewhat not thrilled with Jake, my son's schooling. And so we're looking for educational experiences. And then we were like, I'm going to fly to Boston to go to this robot conference, and I'm going to take Jake. And so we got t-shirts printed overnight with 𝘞𝘈𝘕. We flew up there. We went with our branded stuff and met all these robotics vendors. We had a little bit of a kerfuffle getting Jake in as an underage sort of intern. But it was an amazing experience. We're literally walking around with our matching t-shirts. Boston Dynamics was there. If you've seen these things, and these crazy humanoid robots and stuff. And so I think one of the things that Ricci are both really into is obviously combining family and business. And one of the things that's been enormously gratifying is now that our kids are old enough, being able to bring them into the fold as well.
I trust me when I tell you this, you do them a tremendous service. And as they get older, it's even more important.
Yeah.
I do want to add some small tidbit to that story, which is Ferol had sent maybe 2 or 3 emails at that point. And then when he found out about the conference, he threw up a website.
Oh, that's right.
Put the 2 or 3 articles that he had, and then applied for a press pass and got it. So he got to go as press.
Yeah.
And so, for all the entrepreneurs that are listening out there, it's that kind of hustle, right? You don't have to have all the things. You just need to do a little bit of work, show a little bit of curiosity, put something up there and try. And you never know who's going to say yes. It's pretty incredible.
I had 2 blog posts, 2. I have 0 expertise in robotics, and I applied for the press pass. It saved us $1,000.
But the person vetting you wouldn't look past the second article anyhow. So
yeah. Plus, they're thrilled to have press there. I think that's
absolutely
the thing, is people want you there as an entrepreneur, even if you're just getting started. So I think just go. And if you're scared, do it scared.
Yeah, of course. Of course. Listen,
the other great thing about having, when you run a company, you're an entrepreneur, you get to pull in all these other things that you're passionate about and test them out within the framework that you maybe have within your business. Now, at the same time, you do need to focus. So, it's not like we're off doing these kind of side projects all the time. But that is one of the huge benefits to being an entrepreneur and running your own business, is that you have the flexibility to do that kind of stuff. And it's really cool.
It is very cool. And before you drag us back to vegetables, I think we're going to conclude this wonderful meal that was quite a banquet. Hopefully I know there was plenty of nutritional value, good calories, packed full, but ending on a wonderful dessert. Thank you both so much for adding your voice, sharing your experiences. Much continued success. And again, greatly appreciate what you do to continue to support the ecosystem that supported you back in the day. Whether you realize it or not, it's a great example for others to follow, and people are paying attention. So thank you for that.
Well, thank you, Tom, and to NCIDEA and everything that you all do. Honestly, it was, life-changing for us, and not just us. All the ripple effects that have come from having this company. And it's just been really wonderful to be able to have this conversation.
Great. Thanks so much. Take care.
Thanks, Tom.